being willing to look at something. It doesn't mean you have to have the answers. It doesn't mean you have to do the fix. Are they willing to look at things?
Yeah, the accountability
Are
part.
they being accountable? Are they willing to change behaviors, even if they don't know how to do it yet, but are they like, this is something that I'm working on, and either making behavior changes or being the fact that I don't know what to do with this shed. I don't know how to change that yet. Then those are some like really green flags, because everybody has stuff and everybody has different levels of stuff. And it's what you're doing with that, what you're doing, how you're showing up with it. And most people that have had a really difficult time don't come out of the gates being accountable. Most people have made a lot of mistakes on their own before they're willing, or not even willing, but able to start seeing it and start looking at it. So you just have to decide what feels like a healthy space for you.
We'll make it out and fall in love tonight.
We're starting right now.
Podcasting is now.
Podcasting has begun.
Now.
It's the Steph and Craig Show. Episode, I believe, 32.
Wow.
Yeah,
All
we're
right.
in it now.
We made it.
We're in it to win it.
We are here. We are here. We are here. We are here.
How does it feel? I think it's, today's August something, right?
It is August 14th.
So it's 3 months. 3 months of
15th,
podcasting.
15th, yeah.
On, what do you think? How's it feel? How's it feel?
You know, it feels like...
How's it feel? Tell me how it feels.
Amazing.
It is pretty
having
cool.
so much freaking fun.
Yeah.
It is so much fun.
It's been going really well, huh?
Yeah.
We're having a lot of fun with it. I'm excited. Also, I was going to ask you before we started recording, but I'm just going to ask you now.
Here we go.
This is back to school time. We've got a lot of people out there in the world that's listening, I'm sure, right? And if your kids are going back to school, I don't know how you feel about it. I always felt relieved and excited when kids went back to school. I know that you had a much different feeling. But this is the first year in like 20 years that we haven't been doing back to school stuff.
Yes.
Our youngest graduated last year, so this was the very first year where we haven't experienced that. How does that feel for you?
I did, like, back to school time was like always hard. I'm like, you can't have them back. I didn't have them long enough. It's not your turn. It's my turn. It's still my turn. I want to hang out with them. So I was always kind of sad when they went back to school. And it's funny, like, being on this side of it, at first when they started bringing out the back to school stuff, my first instinct was panic. I was like, shit, I forgot, like I'm behind. I don't know. I haven't done all the things, because it's so many things you have to do. And so my initial reaction was like, it's already here. That panic, because I hadn't done anything because he graduated. And I was like, oh yeah, we don't have to do that now. We don't have to do that now.
Right?
Yeah.
Is there any part of you? I mean, I'm sure there's a part of you that's relieved.
Absolutely.
Right?
Yeah. There's that part of me that's like, oh, we're done. There's no more school. And it's like, I'm even having dreams about them as babies often. I had one last night.
About the kiddos?
And yeah, last night was our youngest. And I was like looking through his old clothes. I might cry to talk about it. I was looking through his old clothes, which is something I've never done in real life. And I was holding it up, and I like also...
Sorry, was that sarcasm?
Yes.
I was going to say, I'm fairly certain
that was
I've
sarcasm.
seen you look at old baby clothes.
And it's like, also, I'm like, look. But in my dream, which I also do in real life, I held it up to me and was just like remembering the feel. I'm going to cry. But in my dream, I was like doing it in a mirror because I could see what it would look like when I was holding him. But in the mirror, the reflection... like he was there in his little baby head. And I'm like, oh my gosh, in the mirror. And it made sense to me in my dream. In the mirror, the reflection is you can see the memory. Oh, so I was staring at the mirror and got to see his little head and his little face and his little, and I was like holding him and I could feel the weight of him. And I was like, ah.
Oh my gosh.
And so when I woke up, I was like, oh, hold it, hold the memory, hold it. Cause it's there, so I can remember. It's been, he's like a 6'1" man. It's been a while since I got a like old little baby. And so it was like really fast, just like hold it in the memory. Cause I know that was coming from actual memory. And it was like, hold it. It's right here. I can touch that memory now. I can touch it with the sensations of it. And so I got to hold him as a little baby last night. And that was wonderful.
That's so cool.
We're already crying. We're like 2 minutes in. I'm bawling.
What a magical mirror too. How neat would that
Right?
mirror be in real life?
Right?
To be able to look into the mirror and see memories. I don't know, that might be good or not. That in this case,
Right?
that's a beautiful dream. That's so cool.
Yeah. It made me really happy.
Yeah.
It was so joyful to be able to access that and tap back into that. So my memory mirror in my dream was amazing.
That's so neat.
Yeah, it was amazing. But other than emotions, because all the babies are grown. They're all grown.
Yeah, we got a bunch of
is-
adult children on our hands.
It is a relief.
I guess it's us as well.
Right? We're all adult children now. There's support groups for that, kiddos. Go to them. I got uncomfortable there.
Kids, go to some
We-
support group for
Yeah.
what we did to you. Good luck.
Yeah. We
We don't
did our
talk a lot
best
about
and-
parenting
Yeah.
on the podcast, and we don't talk a lot about our kids. And part of it is due to respecting their privacy and their anonymity, their enemies, their enemies.
With friends like these, who needs anemones? It's from
cute.
Nemo.
You're so cute. Yeah, that's part of the reason why we don't. And another part of the reason too is because we have so much stuff wrapped up around parenting
Yeah.
and wrapped up around our kids. And I think it's something that we probably should talk about. I don't think we're going to do it today.
Yeah.
It's not on the agenda for today's episode, but I do think it's something that we need to discuss because obviously it's a ginormous, like our youngest child graduating from high school and getting ready to, launch his life, getting ready to
Do his
leave the
thing.
nest and go do what it is that he's going to do with his life. This phase for us of going into a completely uncharted waters when it comes to parenting. We've never been here before.
Right?
And we're not quite there yet, but we're getting really close. Like
Yeah.
he's pretty much autonomous for the most part, and we get the luxury of getting to spend time with him when we get to, like all of them, right?
Right. So I'm definitely not rushing it.
I might be.
I'm get grumpy face. I'm not rushing
It's
it.
interesting. It's an interesting thing. I think a lot about the difference between how you and I have parented over the years, but also how we still show up as parents. Because I think we're still parenting in a sense, but it's really not the case. I think we're just maintaining relationships now with our kids, which is great, right? I'm really grateful that that's what we get to do. And we do that so differently. And I'm always critical of my own, like how I'm doing as far as maintaining those relationships with our kids. And I'm hypercritical of myself. And I think sometimes that bleeds over onto you, where I might come off as being judgmental or critical of how you're showing up and what you're doing at this phase of our parenting journey, where you're trying to still maintain and cultivate, these bonds and connections with our kids. And I know that's not helpful. I know that that's not beneficial at all, but it's also, I've been thinking a lot about this because I don't want to spend the rest of our time with our kids, meaning, the connection that we have with them. I don't want to spend the rest of my life feeling critical and judgmental at myself for how I'm showing up as a parent, or a lot of different ways. It's not just in parenting. I'm hyper sensitive to it in parenting, like as a father, because that's a spot that I feel is so, not just so important, but also, I don't know, it's just a spot that means so much to me. Do you know what I mean? And so I'm trying to figure out how to be less judgmental and critical of what I'm doing. But the problem is I'm continually running, because we're doing all of this inner child work and all of this healing work with our past and with our trauma and with everything that we experienced and went through as children. And part of that process involves looking at your parents differently and processing through those experiences differently and healing the different wounds and everything like that that has taken place. So it's undoubtedly causing me, I mean, it's not a negative side effect, it's a natural side effect where I'm taking things that I'm unpacking in my own personal processing with parenting and the relationship that I have with my parents. And then it bleeds over into the relationship that I have with the kids. And the majority of the time that bleeding over is all in my head. It's not literal like interaction with them or communicating with them or being on the phone with them, or do you know what I mean? It's all internalized stuff. Does any of this make sense?
I mean,
You're
felt
looking
like
at me like I'm a
was.
crazy man.
I was following you, but then I'm like, I would like you to express more about the bleeding over parts.
Well, what it is it's like I'll have recognition of something that my parents did or do still. And then it becomes, I can't do that. I don't want to do that. I want to make sure that I don't do that. And it's not just as simple as like, well, I'll make sure that I don't do it. I'm hyper obsessed about not recreating those same dynamics.
Mm-hmm.
So all of it is ruminating, all of it is processing, all of it is reflecting, all of it is trying to make sure that I don't do this thing. And sometimes that bleeds over and kind of affects the relationship in a sense.
Okay, so I understand. So if like
But for the most part, it's like stuck in this shame cycle spiral loop of I'm a shitty parent, I'm a shitty parent, I'm a shitty parent because I'm doing something that's like my parents.
Okay.
And my parents were so shitty, and because they were so detrimental towards me and my growth and my development and my pain and my trauma, then I'm recreating that cycle. And I think that is only, partially true. I don't think the reality is that that's really the case. It's just my fear.
Yeah, it's trying to find that healthy balance between doing better than your parents did, and when you catch yourself repeating cycles, to adjust and to be accountable for those cycles and not letting it get in the way of actually being present with your kids and being present with them and enjoying life, the time that you have with them, because you're like, don't do this, don't do this, don't do this. So you're trying to find the balance of not repeating patterns and being present while you're with them. Does that kind of make sense? Is that what you're saying?
Yeah. I mean, yeah, all of what you said makes sense, but I get stuck in the loop of it because, again, it's my own processing.
Okay.
Right. And when it comes to actual interaction with the kids, because so much of it is just text messages and phone calls and things like that, especially since they live in Utah and we live in Tennessee and all those kind of things. Right. But I think what's taking place is I have to constantly remind myself, like it's really easy for us to remind ourselves with this, with our youngest who's 18, where he's not thinking about his parents a lot.
Yeah.
The priority for him isn't what mom and dad are doing and or feeling and or thinking, or he's not really concerned about what we're up to or doing. And I love that. And I have to remember that, because otherwise my hyper fixation on what they're doing or what they're thinking or what they're feeling or how they're feeling in relation to me is cumbersome to carry, because it's just not reality. I think even our daughters, who are older, for those listening, we've got 3 older daughters and then our son. I don't think they are sitting around spending a lot of time thinking about me or thinking about us. They're living their life, doing their thing. And I think the only reason why it's coming up for me now is because I am spending a lot of time sitting around thinking about my parents, but it is in relation to, the processing and everything like that. So it's hard for me to kind of see through the murky waters of all of this. But at the end of the day, I'm really just trying to do everything I can to continually cultivate healthier relationships with the kids in an effort to, be a better parent.
Yeah.
It sucks. It's hard.
Yeah, it's really hard. Like, I resonate with what you're saying. I see that. And, I definitely do a lot of like, make it better, make it better, make it better, make it better, make it better. You can see it, so you can hear anytime, like another thing that I feel, and I struggle but what my default is, if they're upset, it's because I am wrong. So it's not like they're doing anything wrong. Like I know what causes this. I know what it's like to be upset on their end. So clearly it's something that I need to fix. It's something that, and also getting really frustrated too at like certain things. If there's like this tension, if I'm always feeling like I'm wrong and everything that I'm doing is wrong, I'm not showing up lighthearted for them. I'm showing up with fear and panic and not wanting to mess up and not wanting to anger them or make them mad, which I do with like all of them. So it's very much then that energy for them is like, ugh. And then they're feeling this stuff and I'm like, oh, they're resistant. I'm doing it. And let me try and overlove and let me try and fix me. And they're like, are you doing? And then it's the tension. And yeah, I definitely like go into it with trying to like in that obsession loop as well. In that part of like, well, it must be this. It must be this. And I must fix this. And I must make it better and forget. At times, there's a lot of times I do the present thing. I can pull that off, but I oftenly, is that a word?
It is. It's thinking about things oftenly, but also
#oftenly.
He's trying to come up with some play on words. I don't know what the "ly" part would be. Oftenly,
like mostly.
There you
mostly
go.
did.
It's when you're mostly
Oftenly.
thinking about things oftenly.
I often
mostly think about things.
Just try really hard to not be a damaging parent. And the more I focus on not being a damaging parent, it's almost like the more damaging I am. But I think, no, I was definitely more damaging when I didn't think I was damaging. And so it's a loop that I get in as well.
Right.
And it's like, it's hard. I think we don't talk about it because this is my biggest wound is like my point of view is like, I can just see all the things that I did wrong and all the ways that they have to recover because I was the mom. And it's scary when you peel back more layers as you heal and as you heal from things that hurt you, you see how you repeated behaviors. You see how you learn. So there's things that you thought you were doing a good job on. There's decisions. And then you have like, oh, those were actually hurtful. And it's a delicate balance to work on that on yourself. Be accountable for your kids, but not make them make you feel better. Not show your shame. Like show up in accountability, but not show their shame. But you have to figure out how to handle all of that. And I can't focus a lot on things that I did right, but I can focus on things that I can do right now. How I can show up in a present self, in a embodied self, in an accountable self, in a willing to be like, yeah, I messed that up. Yeah, I messed that up, which I get to say a lot. But yeah, it's really hard to not be in that loop. It's really, really hard. And oftentimes I don't know what I'm doing. I still don't know what I'm doing. Our youngest is 18. I've got experience. I still don't know what I'm doing.
Right?
Yeah.
Yeah. I think one of the things that you were just talking about where you see the ways that you hurt them in the past by your actions and behaviors, or how your actions and behaviors caused them harm.
Mm-hmm.
And it's always twofold for me where, yeah, that's 100% the case. And I'm also looking at that through that is my perception of what took place. Because again, who knows if that really caused any hurt? Who knows if that really caused any harm? Who knows if that was really a detrimental thing for them? I'm basing all of it off of my perception of that experience or that interaction or that reality that we lived through. But again, it's through my perception. It's not theirs. It's like the thing that I always have to remember. And I wish I would have remembered, or somebody would have told me, or I would have listened. Who knows, right? I was incredibly young when I had kids. And so I don't know if I was going to be a lot of paying attention and listening to what people were telling me about advice. But remembering that they're completely separate and autonomous, living their own life and their own experience. And so how I perceive something is mine. That's how I perceive it. That's how I perceive the experience. So they might not have the same perceived hurt or trauma or issues or pain that you think they do. You might just be projecting your own onto them. And it's not to say that they don't, right? It's not like a complete scapegoating, like, sorry, I never did anything wrong. But I think sometimes I know that I beat myself up too much. And I think I'm too, terrible of a dad, and that I've made too many mistakes and caused too much heartache and too much problem and too much issues. And that's somewhere in the middle, I think, where, yeah, we definitely made mistakes, but it's probably nowhere near what we're afraid they are. And sadly, it's probably nowhere near what ours was. And I don't mean that sadly in the sense for our children. I mean, we had tough childhoods. We had some trauma that's well documented on this podcast that we talk about all the time. So
I think our kids, I mean, there's that perception and then there's that projection I do, but I also think our kids had some tough rounds too.
They totally did. And like, that's the other part of it too, is they have things that we're completely oblivious to.
Right.
They have issues and heartache and experiences that they've gone through that we have no idea about, that really shaped and influenced, and that was impactful and hurtful and painful for them. And some of those things we weren't involved with, and some of them we were, right? There's going to be stuff I think that we may never know about that we did because of...
Or that we missed.
Yeah, or that we missed. There's so much. I think that, like, the more we're not super actively, like, I think a lot about people that have young kids. We've got some friends that have younger kids, and I remember so much the stress and the chaos, and like we were talking earlier about, back to school and this time of year and all of these kind of things. And I mean, it was 20 years of just fucking doing everything that we could to figure it out, because it was never smooth. It was never like easy, or never once did I feel like, well, we got this thing figured out. It was always like, shit, we got to do back to school now. We got to figure out clothes. What lists do they need? Everyone had some different list of God knows what from kindergarten onwards.
Right.
And the lists would just change. But I love not having to have any of that anymore.
Yeah.
It's a really big relief from my shoulders. And of course I miss them. Like, that's the interesting part. I think that men and women process parenting differently. I mean, that's not like groundbreaking news there. Right.
That's
like,
just in.
Stop the presses that nobody uses anymore and put a hold on this before it goes out, because we need the people to know that men and women are different when it comes to parenting. But I think about that too, where part of me wishes I could give you some of the way that I feel about things.
Yeah.
Because it doesn't feel as emotionally kind of entangled.
Yeah.
And I also wish that I felt more about things how you feel sometimes, where I felt more emotionally kind of entangled in all of it.
Yeah.
It's weird. I can tell you this, like, I'm really grateful that we have children. I'm really grateful that that was like a decision that we both made at certain points in our lives, because we didn't have them together. And I'm also, like, I think that our kids will continually be gifts of insight and knowledge into us, because of the work that we'll constantly be doing.
Yeah.
Where I'm always going to be looking to those relationships to become a better version of myself because of how much I love and care about them.
Yes.
But then also the reflection of, like, that's how much I should love and care about me.
Yeah, you absolutely
to just
should
become a better version for Craig and for no one else. But that's all I got to say. That's all I got to say about parenting.
Okay, well, let's move on, because I'm like feeling like, whoa, like it's hard. It's hard. It's definitely a lot. This is going to be like, parenting is, there's a lot of work and healing that I have to do because making like, yeah. So
What's your best piece of parenting advice? And then we'll move on.
what's yours?
Mine is do what feels right and be willing to change. Wow. Because there's so many thoughts, like everybody that has everybody that has parents, everybody that has kids, even people that don't have kids have parenting advice, right? Everybody's got advice on what you should be doing and how you should be doing it from the top down, right?
Yeah.
Your doctors, your midwives, your caregivers, everybody's going to be giving you advice on what you need to be doing. And some of it's great and some of it's not so great. And some of it's terrible advice that you should not be following. But I think what's important is to remember, not like, I hate that adage of like kids are resilient and all that kind of stuff. Yes, kids have the capability to heal like humans do, but you're going to make mistakes. You're going to mess up. You're, going to inadvertently hurt your children in some capacity at some point and at multiple points. So the more you are willing to just simply do the best that you can, given any circumstance, and be willing to change and look at things differently.
Yeah.
And I do think it's important to remember as well that they are completely separate from you, even though they come forth and, women give birth to children and, there's so many qualities and traits that we can see in our children that come from us and all those kind of things. They're still just individual people living their own journeys that you get to witness and be a part of. So let go of the idea of what their life should look like and or feel like, and let it be what it is.
Yeah. That's awesome. That's beautiful.
So if you haven't heard yet, we picked up pickleball and we're having a blast. It's super, super fun. And if you haven't started playing yet, I hope that you do soon. And if you do, we want to help you by avoiding what we did. See, when we started playing pickleball, we just went on Amazon and found some paddles that looked cool. Little did we know, but they actually were hurting our pickleball game and holding us back from being the absolute best pickleball players that we could be. And when we found out that there was a pickleball paddle company here in Tennessee, actually not too far from where we live, we got super excited. Element 6 was started by a couple of brothers who were passionate about the sport and decided to go in and make their own paddles because they needed something that served their purposes a little bit better. Lucky for us, they're now sponsoring the podcast. And I can tell you from experience that their paddles definitely make a difference. The very first time I picked up their paddle and just held it in my hand, I knew I was going to be a better pickleball player as soon as I started playing with it. And it turns out I totally am. They have paddles for everybody, for the beginner, the intermediate, and the pro level. Head over to our website, stephandcraig.co, and click on the link for E6 pickleball paddles. I highly recommend their brand new one, the Torrent, which is what we play with. When you're ready to buy, make sure to use the code Steph and Craig. Not only will you save 10%, but the guys over at E6 are also going to send you out a free gift along with your order. So pick up pickleball, pick up a new paddle from Element 6. We hope to see you on the court soon. Not too long ago, I went down the rabbit hole of trying to find us some new clothes that didn't have all sorts of toxic stuff in them. I was tired of wearing synthetic material when I worked out, when I did things like jiu-jitsu and yard work and hiking and everything like that, because it wasn't really breathable and it started to stink a lot as well. Well, lucky for me, I found Woolly clothing. Woolly uses natural merino wool, and I'm a huge fan. All of their clothes are super soft and they feel really, really good next to your skin. Their clothes are naturally moisture repellent, so when you're wearing them and working out, it almost feels like it's cooling you off. They're also odor resistant, so they don't stink after you wear them. They have a great line of men and women's clothing, and if you've never tried merino wool, I highly recommend Woolly. I've got their boxers on right now. Every episode of the podcast, I wear one of their V-neck shirts. I'm really excited for where the weather starts to change and it starts to cool off a little bit, because then I get to put on my Woolly hoodie again. Head over to our website at stephandcraig.co and click on the link for Woolly. And when you're ready to check out, be sure to use the code Steph and Craig. You'll save 15% on your order. Show them some love and get yourself a great pair of merino wool socks or underwear, or boxers, shirts, pants, shorts, tank tops, workout gear, you name it. Woolly has it.
I think mine is, and it would be, this is the advice that I wish I had. This is what I wish this is how I wish I would have parented. And now who knows if it's right. But if I had to do it again, also I'm grateful we're where we are in life. It would be that being present as much as you can in the moment with them, because all you have is right now. It doesn't matter what happened yesterday. It doesn't matter what you're going to do tomorrow. All you have is right now. So being present with them in the moment, being radically accountable, letting them know, like you taking it to them when you have made a mistake, not, feeling like you're justified in any reaction. Like when you've done it wrong, when you've got it wrong, show them that you can be accountable and change your actions. Like really just like you get it wrong, they get to see that. And never spend a moment worrying about what anybody else thinks of their behavior, of how like teaching your kids how they're supposed to show up to make other people comfortable, to do the like it's like they get to be themselves and teach them to only. And you think you're raising little selfish kids and all of these like entitled and like, wow, would that really be terrible to raise a kid that thought that they had worth and value and were confident in themselves and believed that they could, so that they went and they did? Would that really be a horrible thing? It's just like teach them to love themselves and be themselves. And it doesn't matter what anybody else thinks about them, because that was the biggest thing, is like, this is how we behave at the grandparents' house. This is how we behave here. And I should have never bought into that thing. And I wish that somebody would have told me that when they were younger, instead of telling like the opposite. So that's like, let them be them regardless of who's around. Regardless, they don't need the approval of anybody. Even
you as their parent.
Especially you. Like you get to love them and join them and obviously help them along the way and keep them safe. But whether or not they're doing things that you approve of is like, that's where you can check yourself a bit.
Yeah.
That's where a lot of us can check ourselves a bit. Check a lot of it.
Check a lot of it. Check. Okay. Enough with parenting.
Yeah.
Obvious, like
no wounds there.
No wounds there. Clear and free.
Here we go.
No problems.
So what are we going to talk about today?
Well, we've got some questions today. We get questions all the time through social media and all the different things. And so today we're just going to answer some of those questions and kind of have fun with them. And I'm gonna get. I think I told you before the question.
You told me both of them. I only remember one, and I'm trying like hell to come up with something that you don't already know in regards to this.
Is it the something from childhood question?
Yes.
Okay. So I've planted that seed in your mind. And then we can do that one last.
Okay.
Does that make sense?
We can just so that know. I've been trying because I'm like, there's no way that there's not
something, right?
There's got to be a 1,000,001 things, but I can't think of a single one. And I'm
so this question, and again, we're planting the seed now so that you have time to think about it.
Okay.
Not just you, Steph, also for me.
Yeah. Did you think of one?
No, I'm trying. I'm working on it. It's a great time to think about it while we're recording a podcast and doing other things.
I've been thinking about it.
So this question is from Jazz5313. What's something you got away with in your childhood you've never told anyone about? That's a great question.
Right?
I'm excited. Stay tuned for the answer. Hopefully we'll have one by the end of the episode.
I was going to say it may be in episode 56. We're on 32. Like, stay tuned, folks. We'll figure it out.
Out of nowhere.
We talk about so many things, especially these things as a kid, I'm like, there's got to be. There's no way that you know everything that's in my mind, because if it's something that you got away with, that's in your mind, if it's something that's here, chances are we've talked about it. So I'm trying to grab the stuff that's back here that I don't see anymore.
Well, even if it is something that maybe we've talked about before, or a story, we can still tell it again.
Maybe.
Right?
It's because I told you, it doesn't mean I need to tell anybody else.
That's true. Don't want to admit to anything on camera.
Right? This is a recorded line. No.
It's a recorded line. You're so paranoid that like the government's pulling our podcast clips and be like, here's another one. And they're just putting them up on the wall of all of the crimes that we've committed and admitted to on a podcast at some point. right? We did mushrooms like a week ago, and I don't know if we talked about it on the podcast, but
Well, leave
now
it to
we've done it.
Craig to air my dirty laundry.
Right.
Maybe I've told you too much because you don't keep my secrets. I tell you something confident. You know, like, do you know what she did? Do you know what she did? Do you know what that little shroom head did over there?
That little shroom head. That little mushroom cap. Okay. Here's, this is the other, we've got a couple of other ones. You ready? Mm-hmm. This one is from With God But Still Feel Alone. If the potential partner had a terrible childhood and overall life, is it still okay to start that? I'm assuming meaning like the relationship. So you're getting ready to start a new relationship, or you've been dating for a while, and it appears that that person has had a terrible childhood and or life in both. What should you do? Do you even go down the rabbit hole of trying to be in a relationship with that person? What are your thoughts, babe?
Well, obviously, like, we went for it.
Yeah.
Right. I think if you have the opportunity and the awareness to sit with that beforehand, which we often don't get. Sometimes we find ourselves there, and it's these things that we don't find out till later. So it sounds like, maybe if you have the opportunity and the awareness of this as you're going into the relationship, you've done work on yourself. So you have this awareness, and it depends on how, like, they're showing up in that space. Are they showing up with, yes, I had a difficult childhood. I had a really traumatic. There's a lot of things that I've gone through. And this is why I do all these things, and none of it's my fault. And I just can't stop. And all of these things happen because this happened to me, because justify. Nothing's my fault because I had a hard childhood, and you should just take care. If that's the energy that you're getting, then absolutely not. And I mean, you do you, but that would be something that I wouldn't move towards. And if they're showing up, they had a really hard childhood, they had a difficult childhood, and they're like, I've done these things because of this childhood. I'm still struggling with this. This is what I'm working on. This is, if they're seeing it, they're being accountable for their actions. They're on the process of like looking at themselves and trying. And that is without saying like nobody's perfect. There's still so much shadow that we don't see. There's still so many behaviors that we have not got to. There's still behaviors that we're probably still justifying, but being willing to look at something. It doesn't mean you have to have the answers. It doesn't mean you have to do the fix. Are they willing to look at things?
Yeah, the accountability
part. Are they being accountable? Are they willing to change behaviors, even if they don't know how to do it yet, but are they like, this is something that I'm working on, and either making behavior changes, or being the fact that I don't know what to do with this shed. I don't know how to change that yet. Then those are, I think, some like really green flags, because everybody has stuff and everybody has different levels of stuff. And it's what you're doing with that, what you're doing, how you're showing up with it. And most people that have had a really difficult time don't come out of the gates being accountable. Most people have made a lot of mistakes on their own before they're willing, or not even willing, but able to start seeing it and start looking at it. So you just have to decide what feels like a healthy space for you. How is that person showing up in a way that you feel like is a healthy space? And how are you showing up in a healthy space for them without expecting perfection or explaining away everything for them because they had a hard childhood, which is also something that we've both kind of messed with in that space too. We've both got wrong a lot and have the chance to get right.
Yeah, I agree with everything that you said. I think a lot of it has to do with, because as you were talking, I was thinking like, is there something that would just be too much, right? And I'm sure there is. Everybody's different. Everybody has what is too much for them, right? And if you're aware of it in the beginning, that's great. But it's not just the accountability part that I think is massively important, but there's also levels of accountability, right? Like you were saying, not everybody, like when you have a traumatic past and when you have complex trauma and all of these other things, the ability to show up in accountability in a consistent, healthy, strong, meaning like accountable way is very challenging. So you might have the intention of wanting to be accountable, but accountability takes practice. And the more trauma that you have and the more complex it is and the more issues that you've gone through and experienced, the harder that accountability is going to become, because accountability doesn't feel safe when you come from complex trauma, because you were never like shown it. It wasn't something that you witnessed or saw, right? Oftentimes caregivers, parents, all those kind of things, even just society around us in general, we see how difficult people have being accountable for their actions all the time, right? Everybody wants to lie and manipulate and paint the truth in a light that, serves them the most. And so I think it's not even just like a sliding scale or varying degrees of accountability or truthfulness or honesty. It's fully knowing that is a sliding scale that person's going to be navigating if you're in relationship with them. So I think it's important if they are aware of their issues, or even, because that's the other thing too, right? When you and I met, I was aware of my issues, quote unquote, in air quotes, but those issues might be very few that I was aware of. And I didn't really have a huge sense of the totality of those issues. So even just one issue, there's multiple layers to an issue that I didn't have awareness of. So I would have said, yeah, I'm aware of my issues and these are what they are. And you'd be like, cool, this guy's, working on his stuff and he's aware of what's going on and he's trying to improve himself. Seems like a safe relationship to go towards. And then enter in, the last 10 years of our relationship. So I think that there's a part of it that you have to know that even though somebody might talk about, yeah, I come from this traumatic past, or my childhood was like this and I'm still struggling, the reality is that journey for them to heal and be able to show up in a relationship with like secure attachment type style connection, being able to communicate, all of those things, it's just going to take a lot of work. So making sure that your, not assumptions, what's the word? Expectations, making sure that your expectations take that into consideration, because knowing something and then not doing something, like the space between having like a maladaptive coping mechanism or a behavior that stems from complex trauma, being aware that it's happening and taking place, and then not doing it, that space in between those two things is huge. And there's so much that takes place before you consistently and routinely and kind of like moving forward from this point on, no longer do that thing or experience those issues. That is such a huge space. And depending upon everybody, right, differences and what they've gone through and all those kind of different things, it's not years, it might be decades. It might be like a really long haul before that behavior truly starts to change. And I don't bring this up to be like, oh, don't get into a relationship with somebody that doesn't, hasn't healed or hasn't fixed their issues. It's that age-old question of like, should I date somebody that's not working on themselves? And I'll be like, well, first and foremost, it's hard to find people that are working on themselves, right? The majority of people, I think, still aren't, even though it's probably changing slowly. And I think it's less about somebody that isn't working on themselves, but it's somebody that acknowledges that there's something to work on. Yeah. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. Yeah. I agree with that.
Because it's like the people that are like, oh, and it's the same old thing too, where it's not like not everybody has terrible childhoods, not everybody has issues from childhood or traumas that they've gone through, but everybody has something that they should be working on in some capacity to become a better human being in order to be better in relationships.
Right.
Everybody should do that. Just for the sake of like humanity as a fucking whole. We should all be doing something to improve how we show up in relationship with each other. And it's not like, I'm not judging people that don't do it. I don't do it a lot. I'm not like constantly trying to be a better person, even though kind of I am, right? Mm-hmm. But I remember plenty of time where I just was living life and thinking everything was fine, and there's no judgment. Mm-hmm. But if you're really truthfully wanting a long-term healthy relationship with somebody who comes from trauma and has a traumatic past, just know that it's going to be a lot of work, and it's going to require a lot of patience, and it's going to require a lot of communication. And the other thing that I think should be noted as well is if you're attracted to somebody that has trauma from their past, the likelihood is that you do as well. The likelihood is that you have stuff as well that you need to look at and process. That's probably more than just surface layer stuff, because that's the way that trauma works. We know that.
Yeah. Yeah, it definitely does. But there's like, just with the question in, should you start a relationship? Should you even start that?
Yeah.
If they have it? You said a couple of things that were like, that I was like, oh, point there. And
did I score some points? Are we playing pickleball?
You scored some points, but like I wanted to like emphasize, right? We got the E6 too. Whether or not like it would be, I think for me, right? It's more of a, I don't know if I want to get into that now. Also, I've got a trauma life background. So, but if somebody's like, my life was fine, I don't have anything to work on, I'd be like, peace out.
Right.
That to me would be my skirt. That would be like, I'm really happy for you. That's good. But I don't trust that. And that could be all my wound.
For sure.
That could all be my wound. But that to me that doesn't feel, I don't believe that. I don't believe that everybody that, and again, I'm okay with that being my wound.
Yeah, it doesn't feel authentic.
But
for sure.
it does not feel authentic, and it doesn't feel safe, and it feels like there's a lot of really unhealthy behaviors and dynamics that are taking on that place that are normal, fine. It's just the way it is. Doesn't need to be changed. Can't upset this person, or this person by doing something different, and maybe that person is the person that you're not supposed to upset. To me, there's too many. Like the person's like, I had a great childhood. I'm fine. Everything's fine. I don't have anything to work on. I've just like, things just, I mean, great for the positivity, really. But going into a relationship with that, I'm going to be just as aware as somebody who's got a whole different outlook. I think we all have something to get through. I think we all have that space. So again, that's showing up. And you said something right at the beginning. It was, do you even want to? Right? Are you okay with the amount of trauma? It's okay if you're not okay and what they've experienced isn't something that you are able to share space with.
Yeah, I remember dating some
right?
people before in the past where it was like, I started to see some stuff, right? You start to see kind of behind the curtain of people's things and issues, and they start to kind of show up and manifest. And it eventually becomes like, oh, there's a little too much here for me. This is a little too much for me to kind of deal with and process. And then it's like, yeah, I'm bailing on that relationship. I'm going to end that relationship because at the time they had too much baggage. There's nothing wrong with that.
There's nothing wrong with that.
Right. Even if it's a long-term, when I say long-term, it's like if you're with somebody for 6 months, a year and a half, because the truth of it too, like you and I know this, where we knew we had stuff when we got together, but we also hid stuff from each other that didn't come out until after a few years in. And then all the unconscious, like that's the other thing too, right? Everything that you think you know right now, there's like massive waiting room of unconscious parts waiting to show up.
Yeah.
So it's like all the stuff that you have awareness of, whether it's about you or about your partner, or about your relationship, all the conscious things that you're aware of, like double that and triple that and add another 5 extra things on top of that. The unconscious stuff is just waiting to show up. Yeah. And that's the stuff that is incredibly challenging to process, to go through, to understand, because it's happening completely unconsciously. You're doing things that you're not even aware of.
Yeah.
You're saying things, your actions and behaviors. I mean, every time you and me catch an unconscious, whether it's a coping mechanism or an unconscious program that's running, a thought, a belief, a statement about ourselves, about each other, about relation, all of it. There's so many unconscious programs at play all the time. And those ones, I mean, there's no way to know about them. So it's just like you're waiting to find out what their shadow is. And eventually you will,
Yeah.
if you're with somebody long enough.
Yeah.
And I think the question too also, the question also kind of harkens back to the question of like, should we, be fully healed before we get into relationships? And we talked about it a lot on the podcast, and we talk a lot about it as well, just in our relationship. But the idea that that's even possible, that it's just not a reality.
Mm-hmm.
You're always going to have something that needs to be looked at and felt and processed. And there is a lot of stuff that is only going to come up in relationship.
Yeah.
So it's a good question.
It
and
is.
I get, it's the same. I mean, it's also like just the big question of like, I'm afraid I don't know what to do.
Mm-hmm.
Right. Relationship is always going to be unknown. It's always going to be scary. Even us right now, where we're going through a level of healing right now with some of the stuff that we're doing and getting like this codependency, like we're getting codependency kind of like a wrangle on it. I feel like it's kind of this wild horse that we're trying to, put a saddle on and figure out how to ride it.
Right.
And control it in a sense.
CD
because...
wranglers. Like
for what?
CD codependency.
I love your words. Your words you come up with. You're like, wait a minute. Wrangling and codependency.
You said wranglers. I just like turned it into an acronym and only the first part.
Looking for the perfect gift for someone that you love? Try thinking beyond the material things and get them the most unique, unforgettable gift possible. A custom song from Songfinch. Songfinch lets you create an original studio quality song inspired by your own life and the ones you love. It's completely unique, personal to you and your story, and will last a lifetime. Songfinch walks you through an easy 4-step process to create your original song. Just tell them who the song's for, provide some personal details about your story, and let them know the type of song that you want. Then pick your favorite Songfinch artist, or get matched with one. They'll write, record, and produce your custom song in just 4 to 7 days. Head over to our website. It's stephandcraig.co and click on the link for Songfinch. When it comes time for checkout, use the code Steph and Craig. You're going to save $20 off your order. Once you get your custom song, be sure to tag us because we want to hear it. We're probably a lot like you, where we had some pans that had been kicking around our kitchen since we met, actually. They're over a decade old, and it was time for them to go. Lucky for us, we found Heritage Still. Heritage Still offers premium cookware that's made right here in the U.S.A. It's actually made here in our backyard in Tennessee. We ditched our old pans and we got ourselves an entire set of Heritage Still. All of their cookware has 5-ply construction, which gives you superior heat distribution and retention when cooking. They also offer a lifetime warranty, which is really hard to find nowadays. Their cookware is versatile for all cooktops. We have a gas range and we absolutely love the way our Heritage pans heat up. They're chemical-free, oven-safe, easy to clean, and Heritage Still is committed to sustainability. They use environmentally conscious practices when producing their cookware. For listeners of the podcast right now, you can save 10% on your order. Head over to heritagestill.us/Steph and Craig, and don't forget to use the code Steph and Craig at checkout to save that 10%.
I think that, basically just trust your gut. If you're feeling like that's not the relationship for you, you don't have to validate it. You don't have to justify it. If that's not the relationship for you, that's not the relationship for you.
Yeah.
Like, you don't have to make every relationship work. You don't have to make every relationship that you're in. Like, you can't.
What do you say, babe, right?
Yeah.
A reason, a season, and a lifetime.
A season, a lifetime. And then there's that's,
sometimes
it's
just for a
impossible
moment.
to make a lasting, lifelong relationship with every single person you come across. And, it's just, there's so much there. And it's not that, let the avoidance unite right now. They're like, God, it fell, take it how you want. But you have that feeling in your belly, and whether it's pulling you towards it or going away from it, listen to it. You don't have to justify it. You don't have to check. Like, you get to trust yourself. And sometimes that's really hard. So, like, listen to that voice, listen to that knowing inside of you. It doesn't mean that it's going to last, but it also doesn't mean that it won't. And it doesn't mean that maybe, you just have to make a choice and go. You just have to, like, you always, it's the choice, and then you have an experience, and then you get to make a decision based off of that choice, which brings you to another choice. So you're never stuck. You have it, make a choice, have an experience, and from that experience, make a decision, which is again the choice. So you're in the cyclical flow, and trust yourself. Trust yourself is what I would say. Do you have more questions?
Yes.
Or actually, do you want to add to that? Do you have more to say?
Oh my God, no. The way that you phrased that, we're like done, moving on.
I know.
Next question.
And then I recognized your face and I thought, oh, you might have had more to say just because I was like,
no,
out.
Trust yourself, people.
No.
Trust yourself. Move on. Fucking done with that question. Here we go. The next one. This one is from Brandykins88. Have you ever been stuck in a repeated argument? How long did it take to work through? Well, you just witnessed one that's going to take us probably a week and a half to get through. No, it's we have been stuck in arguments from the beginning of our relationship that we still haven't worked through. And the thing that we figured out a few years ago, there were several topics that we just, every time we brought them up and every time we talked about them and every time we tried to go towards them, we'd end up fighting. And it's the saying where if it's hysterical, it's historical. And for a long time, that was really hard for me to understand. I didn't get the connection of it. And I think about like hysterical issues and or things. And I'm like, I didn't understand the saying. But what happens is you and I will get triggered by some core wounds, and then all of our coping mechanisms will be activated and come in. So it's not really a conversation about the dishes. It's a conversation about what was activated underneath the surface of it. And there's been some of those things that we've been able to kind of unpack and process and heal through, and they're no longer triggering arguments. There's no longer issues around those things. And there's still some that we don't. So I think what's important is to recognize that when you have issues in your relationship that seem to continually, whatever the argument might be about, whatever the frustration or those repeating things that you just go through over and over and over again, and they never get solved and they never get figured out, they truthfully, and when I say this truthfully, it's sometimes I get scared to speak so definitively on something, even though, again, like, who cares? It's just a podcast. But I really believe that those issues have nothing to do with your relationship or even with your partner. They have to do with your past and with your issues and with your traumas and with your programming. And yes, your partner has like the perfect mix to trigger you and to spark those things. And then their issues come in, and it's a beautiful blend that takes place. But that's what's happening, is those issues are attached to core wounds or to core issues. And yes, they might come from your relationship. So it's not to say 100% that it doesn't have anything to do with your partner or with your relationship. But the reality is, even those ones, I think, because I'm thinking about a couple of ours that are, might be labeled as classically about our relationship. But those ones even have their roots in the past. So those issues that keep coming up over and over again, if it's hysterical, it's historical. If this argument that you keep having never goes anywhere and always results in a terrible fight that lasts and lasts and leaves each other with hurt feelings and disconnect and no problem solving at all, that's because those arguments have nothing to do with the actual argument about what's taking place. It has 100% to do with your past. Yeah. Can you think of any? Sorry, what else? What were you going to say?
I was like, I don't even know if I can add to that. That was just like encompassing from what I felt too. I also didn't understand if it's hysterical, it's historical. I was like, I don't really understand what that means. And
part of my brain heard, go ahead. Sorry, babe, ADD.
No, it's totally okay. It's totally okay.
Squirrel.
I heard, like, I was trying to make sense. I thought it was like, like for me, I associated them, and we talk about this too, how you might have different definitions for the word. Because when I heard hysterical, I was like, oh my God, that's hysterical. I thought laughter.
That's exactly what I was going to say.
And so it's like, what do you mean? Like crazy? Like if you're like, right? It's historical. I couldn't understand. And don't make a reel of that face, okay? God damn it. I couldn't, it didn't click. it just didn't click. It wasn't until like the actual, like the definition of the way it was used, like hysteria. And when things are like extremes and you're out of, it's this thing that keeps coming up and it's overtaking and
yeah, like
you
hysteria and histrionic.
Yeah.
These type of psychedelic terms. They're not psychedelic.
Psychiatric.
I don't even know if
terms?
they're these
Okay.
medical terms. These are official terms.
These words. And then it's and then historical, which means it's like there's roots, it's history, there's a core wound there, there's something that it came from way before. So if there's basically, if it's got like an eruption, then there's something that's been cooking under here. And then as soon as I got that, I'm like, oh, that makes sense. I can see that. But it took so long. I'm like, it's I don't understand if it's funny. It's history. Like it didn't click, and then it did. And I think you've covered everything. I don't have everything or anything to add on.
Yes,
that,
some
really.
of ours are around our kids. That's another reason why we don't talk a lot about them on the podcast. We mentioned it earlier when we were talking about back to school stuff, because we have so many wounds there that literally existed long before our relationship. And so we get really triggered in those moments. I'm trying to think of other ones.
I think kids have been really the ones that have
stood out.
Because it was
it's because we're so defensive around kids.
Yeah.
It's like you and I
we're
still...
both coming from like this place of, we think we're coming from the place of love and what is in their best interest. Right?
Yes. I just realized something because I said what I thought it was, and then you like corrected me to tell me what you think it is. And then I'm like, here we go, folks. It's fucking on.
I thought,
Here comes the argument about... Keep going. I'm being
I thought we were saying the same thing, but yeah. No, I totally get that. Do you want to express what you were saying?
No, I'm being silly. I was just kind of like
if
in my head.
If it's hysterical, it's historical.
Right? If it's fucking funny,
I would like the chance.
It's connected to your trauma. That's probably true.
I would like
as well.
the chance to not cut you off if you would like to
You're
try
fine.
and say what you were
totally
saying.
Just the flow of conversation. I was literally in my head thinking as you were talking, I'm like, oh, this is funny. The one issue that we can't talk about without fighting is kids, and then we're going to give you an example.
Right. I was giving us both the benefit of the doubt at that moment. I feel like I was correcting us. So like I was saying, as much as I think I'm acting in their best interest and acting out of love, I also have to remember when we don't agree, you are acting out of what you believe their best interest is and out of loving them.
Right. And I think
so that's what I was trying to say.
Those two actions are just fear-based protection, essentially, right? It's basically Mama Bear and, Big Daddy Bear getting together, deciding who's protecting the kids.
And when it doesn't show, it looks like the other person isn't loving them or putting their best interests first, because that's what you think you're doing.
We've got that part of our brain that goes like, oh, you're a threat now to my children.
Yes.
And I don't know... Like, there's part of me that thinks that might be, like, there's probably some animal nature in there, because obviously in the animal kingdom, it's, there's a lot of examples where the male is not safe, where female bears,
like bears, exactly. Like bears are the perfect, like
bears are a good example,
there's Mama Bear for a reason, because
right?
Mama Bear has to fight grizzlies, and she will.
Yeah. Right. So I think that part of it's,
but that's just
we might have that instinctual thing inside of us in order to protect our kids, even from each other. But I think the majority of it is programming.
Yeah.
And it's not good programming. It's terrible, toxic programming from our parents. And that's what I think is really being sparked. And that's why I think we have such a hard time talking about it, even still, even though all of our kids are growing up and grown and moved out of the house and everything like that.
Not all of them.
Still.
Quit rushing that, mister.
Yes, not all of them.
Fight, here we go.
Not all of them yet. So I don't know. What is there? I can't think of another one off the top of my head that we definitely have topics that I think we avoid talking about, but I don't know if it's necessarily because it starts a fight as much as it's just emotionally charged and difficult. I guess that's the definition of a fight.
Right.
But I don't think of those topics as fight inducing. I think of those topics as just like emotionally hard and difficult to go through and kind of heavy topics that we have to really be, our needs have to be met. We have to be really clear-headed. We have to be really focused. We have to be really on the same page. Okay, now we're going to sit down and do some deep processing work.
Yeah.
But as far as like, because we still fight about dishes sometimes and kind of like silliness about just making house together. But those ones have really kind of gone away, I think.
Yeah.
What do you think?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, until the next time it shows up. You know?
Are there any other ones off the top of your head?
I think that the kids are the sore spot, and the same one right now. I think that that's the one that has been our sticking point. And I hope to God that if like they're here, that's not saying that it's their fault. I'm not saying they've done anything wrong.
Oh, are you throwing in some caveats in case our kids are listening?
Yeah, I absolutely am.
Yeah.
Like that shit is what we couldn't agree on what was best for them. They weren't the reason of our fight. We couldn't agree on the best action for their behalf. It wasn't their fault. Like
I don't think we have to worry about them listening to the podcast.
One day they might.
That's true.
And I know that like a lot of kids feel like it's their fault. And so hearing that our thing was about kids, it was about it wasn't about the kids, it was about our parenting styles.
Yes.
Is a better way to say it. We still fight over our parenting styles and our parenting choices, not about kids. It's the way that we're parenting is the problem, not the kids.
Not the actual child. Or what they've done.
Yes.
Yeah. No, that's a good thing to note.
Yeah.
I forgot I was going to say something. I don't know if it's going to come back.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, there it is. The reality too, I think, in this topic is if you're fighting with your partner, if you're arguing with your partner, that means that your nervous system is activated in some way. That doesn't...
Or it means your partner's being a butthead.
Right?
Just kidding.
Your partner could definitely be being a butthead. Because you're in a PG movie from 1993.
Would you prefer I used a more intense word?
Hey, butthead. No, you're activated. Your nervous system is activated if you're in an argument or if you're fighting with your partner. And the reason I mention that is because I think that should be the first and foremost thing that you're thinking about. It's what we really started to prioritize a few years back, and it made such a huge difference because you can't, like by definition, if your nervous system is activated, that means that you don't have full capacity of you don't have your full capacities. You don't have your ability to think rationally. You don't have your full brain online, which means you're not fully using everything that you have available to you. Your emotions, your thoughts, your experiences, all of those things are diminished because you're in an activated state. As far as how much that's diminished or how great of an activation it is, that's up to the individual, up to the situation and everything like that. But I think that's the thing that really should be acknowledged first and foremost and addressed before anything else. Because again, like how many times did we push pause on a conversation and come back to it at a later date and time, whether it be a few hours or the next day or whatever the case may be. And then at that point, we're able to rationally process and go through something instead of just spinning in chaos through activation. And so if you remember that first and foremost, and it's like, okay, if this issue brings up fights, or if we fight every time we talk about this issue, or if we get into it every time we talk about this topic, then what we need to do is we need to prioritize making sure that our nervous systems are regulated, that our needs are met, and then we need to set aside time to have a conversation about this thing. But I would also encourage you to, before you even do that, to reflect on what's really the underlying thing that's coming up. Most of the time it's fear-based, reactionary things where you feel like you're losing love in some capacity, right? I think a lot of times that's what it boils down to, is like abandonment wounds. They get triggered, and then we all defend and protect those abandonment wounds in different ways.
Yeah.
So sometimes it's really simple, but then we make it really, really difficult and really, really hard. Do you know what I mean?
Yeah. And there's also too, like sometimes they're too big for you to navigate on your own. sometimes you might want to look at getting some help, getting somebody that's going to come in and help you both figure out how to be heard in that space and what's going on. Sometimes things are so loud right in front of your face that you can't see around them without somebody else's help. And you're not weak. That's not a shameful thing. That's a really strong, courageous thing to be able to ask for help. And also making sure that you're asking for safe help, because so many people will be happy to give you their points of view.
Just like us.
We're giving you our points of view right now.
Just like
right?
us.
Right?
We're happy to send those questions into info@stephandcraig.co, and we'll happily answer them on a later podcast.
And we will answer them. But like if what we're saying doesn't feel safe for you, don't take it.
Look at your nervous system. No, the advice is great. Just you need to look at your nervous system. If you don't feel safe given the answers that we've given you, then that's a you problem.
How many red flags can we come up with? One thing, right?
Right.
So it's that whole thing. It's like take what resonates and leave what doesn't. And if it's something that makes you curious or sparks something, like look at it, go there, and always get help. And if it does not feel safe, it doesn't feel healthy for you to move in that direction, then don't.
Trust it.
Don't listen to your belly. Trust yourself.
We do have fun answering questions. Again, we do these episodes, or we're going to be doing these episodes. I think this is the first one that we've done. So we'll do them periodically where we'll answer questions. Sorry, baby, you switched up cameras. I was talking to somebody else. I was talking to that camera over there.
There you go.
And now I'll talk to this one over here. So now it's very confusing for the people that are watching. You can go watch our podcast on YouTube, and we highly recommend that you do. I'm confused now where I'm supposed to be looking.
Look at your own camera.
I'm going to look into the microphone. I'm going to pretend there's a camera in the microphone. So we love it getting questions, and send them to us however you'd like. You can email them to us. If you go to our website, you can ask us a question there. Our website is stephandcraig.co. Somebody out there, and if it's you, if you've got stephandcraig.com, hit us up. And if you know who does, hit us up. Tell us who they are. No, I'm teasing, but that's why it's stephandcraig.co, because somebody else has stephandcraig.com. So one day we'll own it, probably. Anyways, ask us some questions. We're happy to answer them on a later episode of the podcast. And another thing that we're really excited about is we have some sponsors for the podcast now. So if you're a longtime fan, I'm losing my voice. If you're a longtime fan of the podcast and you want to support the show in some way and support us, this is a great way to do it. We are partnering with brands and companies that we really actually use and like and appreciate and benefit and believe in. And that's why we're bringing them to you. So it's a great way to not just get some cool stuff and some great things at some discounted rates, but also support the show and support the podcast and support what we're doing with all of it, because we believe that we all do better when we heal together. And we truthfully do believe that. I know that that's been a massive experience for us over the course of our relationship, and our healing is doing it not just with each other, but in community with other people and with help. And that's one of the beautiful things about podcasts and about the internet and about social media, is the opportunity to connect with so many different people, because we all do better when we heal together. My belly's growling. It's time for lunch.
Let's go.
You ready, babe?
Wrap us up.
Wrap it up. Let's close it out. Wrap it up.
You want me to start it this time? It's always you. Okay, here we go. Wrong camera. Somebody should get on that. Expect the best.
Plan for the greatest. Where's that camera? Which one am I supposed to look at?
We got a wild ride. Wait and see, you and me. We were meant to be.
We want to make something perfectly clear. This podcast is intended for entertainment and educational purposes only. It is not intended to be used as a substitute for professional advice. We're sharing with you our own personal experiences and insights, things we have found to be helpful on our healing journey. But we are not licensed therapists. If you need help, it's important to seek out a qualified professional. Remember, we believe that we all do better when we heal together. See you soon.